Hello and welcome to our lesson on radicals, dividing radical numbers, a more advanced look. So let's talk about the rules for dividing. In order to divide radical expressions, that means no equal sign, you need to divide like terms. Remember, any whole numbers are considered like terms to other whole numbers, and any radicands are considered like terms to any other radicands. However, radicands and whole numbers are not considered like terms to each other. Here's a quick review. Whole numbers, that's what I'm talking about, the ones that are outside the radical sign. You've got your radicand, which is anything under the radical sign, and then your teeny tiny number is called your index. How do we do this? Well, first, you cannot divide a radical. Instead, you have to multiply the entire fraction by the denominator. Then you treat the problem as a regular multiplication of radicals, and you simplify any remaining radicands. So let's try it. Very first step, you're going to have to go ahead and not divide, but rather multiply by the denominator. So that's radical 2 with the 6 out front. And remember, to keep a fraction equal, whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So we're going to multiply the top, the numerator, by 6 radical 22 as well. Like terms multiply to like terms, which is whole numbers to whole numbers. So on the bottom, for the denominator, you're going to get 6 times 6, which is 36, and then you're going to get radical 22 times radical 22, which is 484. That's for your denominator. Now look at your numerator. You're going to multiply negative 12 times 6, and that's going to give you a negative 72. And then radical 2 times radical 22 is going to give you a radical 44. Now we have to go ahead and simplify. So let's try that on step 2. We're going to take negative, let's put it up here. We're going to take negative 72 radical 44, and it was divided by 36 radical 484. We're going to have to go ahead and simplify. In other words, this is not fully reduced. 484. Didn't we just multiply 22 times 22? So this would make it a perfect square. So the square root of 484 would actually be 22. And 36 gets multiplied by it because 36 was a whole number. Now for 44, didn't we just do that? We had 44 was 2 times 22. And if we break it a little more, it's 2 times 11, which means we have a pair of 2's that are coming out. And a single 11 that needs to stay in. And it's still being multiplied by that negative 72. So let's go ahead and do that. If we multiply negative 72 times 2, we're going to get a negative 144. Radical 11, and that's all going to be over a very big number, which is 792. So far, so good. However, we can reduce right there. We need to go ahead and reduce that one. Okay, so let's take our negative 144 radical 11 over 792, and let's go ahead and reduce it because our whole numbers can be reduced. And if we do that, it turns out that we can divide both of them by 72. It goes in evenly. So if we divide 72 into 144, we're going to end up with 2. And it's going to be a negative because it's a positive divided by a negative. And then 72 into 792 goes in 11 times. And we have a radical 11. We can't reduce 2 and 11 any further. 11 radical can't be simplified any further, so this would be your final answer. Negative 2 radical 11 over 11. Let's try another one. Here we've got division, but we don't really divide. Instead, we focus on this denominator, and we're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. So that's 3 radical 32. And if you notice, when we do this, we end up getting rid of the radical sign. So we end up with a 32 on the bottom. And we end up multiplying the whole numbers, which is 3 times 3, so that's 9. That's a shortcut that you can memorize. Anytime you multiply the same denominators and you have radical, it actually removes the radical sign, and you just multiply the whole numbers. Now, we still have to multiply up top. We're going to have to multiply 15 times 3, and 15 times 3 is going to be 45. And then we do have to multiply 9 times 32, and 9 times 32 is 288. Let's go ahead and finish out the multiplication, especially on the bottom. You're going to get 9 times 32, which is 288. And up top, you have 45 radical 288. All right, pretty sure 288 can be reduced, obviously, because we got it by creating 9 and 32. So if we take 288 and we factor tree it, 9 and 32 were used to create it. We can break down 9 into 3 and 3. There's primes. We can take 32 and say 8 times 4, so it's 2 times 2. And then we have 4 times 2 and another 2 times 2. We're looking for pairs. 1, 2, and we have a pair of 3s as well. So outside the radical, we're going to move the pairs. Our original 45 is still there, and now we're multiplying it by 2 times 2 times 3. They're all pairs, so we multiply them together. 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 3 is 12. And then we have our lonely little 2 there. And this is all over 288. And that's done. We have to finish multiplying here first, and then most likely we can reduce the whole numbers. So if we multiply 45 times 12, we're going to end up with 540. And then we've got a radical 2, and this is still all over 288. Now it turns out that we can divide by 36 evenly. So if we divide the top and the bottom by 36, 540 divided by 36 is going to be 15. You still have your radical 2. And 288 divided by 36 is going to be 8. That's as far as you can reduce it. Nothing goes into 15 and 8 evenly, so you've got 15 radical 2 over 8, and that's your final answer. Negative 5.2 radical 20 divided by negative 4.3 radical 15. Decimals don't matter. Make the same exact way that you did it before. Negative 4.3 radical 15, and then negative 4.3 radical 15. Let's shortcut it. We know that the 15 comes out of the radical sign, and the negative 4.3 gets multiplied by itself. And when the negative 4.3 gets multiplied by itself, it's 18.49, and those end up being multiplied together. Now on the top, when you do your multiplication, you're going to end up with a negative number, and it's going to be it's going to be positive 22.36, and then you have a radical 300. Obviously 300 can be broken down. It can be broken down into 20 times 15. So if we take 300, 20 times 15, and we break it, 3 and 5, 4 and 5, 2 and 2. Got a pair of 2s and a pair of 5s and a lonely 3 left over. So that means that I'm going to have up on top 22.36, and we're going to multiply it by 2 times 5, which is 10, and then we have a radical 3 all by itself, and down on the bottom it's 18.49 times 15, and that's going to give us 277.35. Now when we do this, when we multiply it by 10, we're actually just moving the decimal over one time. So it turns out that our final answer is going to be 223.6 radical 3 divided by 277.35. And that would be our final answer. You've got an even number and an odd number, and nothing's going to go into both of those evenly. All right, let's look at one last example. Instead of a half, let's write it as 0.5. It's so much easier to deal with. I don't like fractions. 0.5, and then we've got radical 62 over negative 3 radical 4. Now, remember that we have to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the current denominator. So we're going to multiply it by negative 3 radical 4, and then multiply it by negative 3 radical 4. If you remember the shortcut, the whole purpose of doing that, it's because it removes the radical sign and it just squares the number. So on the bottom, we're going to have 4, removed from the radical sign, and squares negative 3. So it's negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. And then on top, we're taking a half of negative 3. So that's negative 1.5. And then we're going to have to multiply 62 times 4, and that's going to give us 248. 248 is not fully simplified. Obviously, we just created it using two other numbers that weren't primes. So we're going to have to take 248 and break it down into primes, which was 62 times 4. So we have 2 and 2. And for here, we can have 2 and 31. Prime, 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 and prime. Since we're looking for squares, pairs. So a pair of 2's comes out. So we're going to end up with negative 1.5. That's our original number. Multiplying it by the pair coming out. And then there's our lonely little guys, which is 2 times 31 back underneath. And this is all over 9 times 4, which is 36. Go ahead and write it out, and you're going to end up with 1.5 times 2, that's a negative 3, radical 62 over 36. But wait, we're not done. You have a 3 and you have a 36. We can reduce. So when we reduce, we're going to end up with a negative 1 radical 62 over a 12. And this would be our final answer. Negative 62 over 12. Quick review. Multiply only like terms, which means all whole numbers need to be multiplied by themselves. All radicands need to be multiplied by themselves. And once you do that, be sure that you simplify any remaining radicands. And that's it for our lesson on radicals, dividing radical numbers, a more advanced look.